If you cast your mind back all the way to 2008, a little gem was released over on the Xbox 360. It went by the name of Left 4 Dead. Now this was nothing special at the time really. It came out during an influx of other zombie games, so people over there were just enjoying their time, taking all of that undead content and just running with it. And then 1 year later, to the day, Left 4 Dead 2 came out, and my god, did it throw up a storm. First off, people were annoyed that they've just released a sequel after the game had only been released for a singular year. But Valve managed to turn it around by still releasing DLC for the first game, including a pretty cool DLC called The Passing, where the teams from both games managed to meet up, which is a really nice way to keep the peace and try to bridge the annoyance. With Left 4 Dead 2 releasing in 2009, it seemed like the series was ready for the long haul. But the issue with this really was just that it was being developed and published by Valve, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Valve is absolutely terrified of the number 3. With nothing but rumours and speculation, everyone had been hoping for another Left 4 Dead game. The 4-person multiplayer cooperative zombie killing shooter was a massive hit. Even now, it still gets around 10,000 players on Steam, and considering that this game came out on the Xbox 360 and hasn't had any major work done on it, that's incredibly impressive. They continued to make content for this game for a little while after it came out. With the last official DLC coming out in 2012, they did recently release another DLC, back in 2020, but it was a player-made chapter that Valve passed through in an update called The Last Stand. It's kind of beautiful the way that panned out, right? The problem with this DLC is it added to the speculation about getting a third Left 4 Dead game, but it never came to fruition. Until 2021, where Turtle Rock Studios decided they wanted to give the people what they wanted. They released the spiritual successor of Left 4 Dead, Back 4 Blood. Now Turtle Rock Studios were originally called Valve South, so they'd been working on Left 4 Dead when it originally came out, alongside the other big projects that Valve were working on at the time, such as Counter-Strike. This did however mean that across Turtle Rock Studios they had retained a lot of the staff that worked on the original Left 4 Dead games, meaning they were probably the perfect people to try and make this IP. Now Back 4 Blood is pretty much Left 4 Dead in everything but name. It's a 4-person multiplayer cooperative zombie killing shooter. Well, alien killing shooter because of copywriting issues. At least I think, don't quote me on that one. With the same style of gaming, with each act being split into smaller missions, it's pretty much the same as the original campaigns in the first game, with an array of weapons to help you fight off the hordes with relatively small levels of story throughout the game. Now I only say that the levels of story are small because, realistically, I mean, they're there, there's a pretty solid story, but it doesn't really matter all that much. It's not that the story is necessarily bad though, it's just that things that really matter in this game is the gameplay, and although the story might be present, it's not really that noticeable. The game is incredibly fast-paced. The harder the difficulty, the harder the game gets, which is to be expected really, but the slope in the difficulty is way steeper than I ever would have thought on initial inspection. The starts you on the first difficulty, which is Recruit. That's pretty standard, there's always a first difficulty really, there's usually a starter difficulty in most games, but then it would go to Normal, whereas Back 4 Blood decided it would be easier to just jump straight into Veteran, which is a lot harder than Recruit, straight off the bat. The game's progression is really all based around the difficulties. In the original Left 4 Dead games, it was all about creating a strategy that when you were moving up through the difficulties would work, whereas in Back 4 Blood, sure the strategy element does have a lot of play towards it, but it's all mainly based around a new system that they've added into the game with decks of cards. Now the decks are really interesting in the way that they play out, and in all honesty I think they've done a really good job at adding some extra longevity into the game. You work your way through your levels in the campaign and through the Trials of the Worm to earn supply points which you'll then use back at the base, which they call Fort Hope, to buy things from supply lines. On the supply lines you'll find an array of things. These cards, which will help you reassess your strategies and also push you forward in the game alongside some cosmetic items. These are just things like weapon skins and different outfits for the characters. They also supply you with burn cards. These are similar to the normal cards that you're using, but they are only able to be used for a single playthrough. So they're just one-use cards. They're always better than the standard cards that you can get in your deck, which is why they're only single use. You can also find them during your playthrough at little boxes where you have to use your hard-earned copper to grab them. The base of operations at Fort Hope is pretty cool too. In the original Left 4 Dead games it was just a menu, with a lot less customizability, whereas in Back 4 Blood you get this base of operations. This is the place that you can sort through your cards and make decks, specific for how you want to play. Customize both your characters and your weapons, as well as one of my favourite parts, the gun range. This gives you the ability to pick up whatever weapon you want and see how it performs, so you know if you want to give it a go later in the game. And it also lets you know what you want to avoid. No weapon is really a bad weapon, but obviously people prefer different playstyles, so really it is up to you. You can also practice as one of the Ridden. This is what they're calling the zombies, by the way. So you can come to terms with all of their abilities. This helps you in the campaigns because you're more aware of what they can actually do, but it's mainly designed for another one of the game modes, Swarm. Now, Swarm as a premise is pretty great. It's a PvP mode that is 4v4. 4 players are the cleaners, these are the usual human protagonists, and the other 4 are the bigger versions of the Ridden, tall boys and whatnot. The aim is for the Ridden to try and kill off all of the cleaners, and for the cleaners to simply just survive. I played it at launch and found it okay. Not overly fun, but also not terribly boring. The only real issue is, the game mode is basically just dead now. I tried to play it over the last week with a friend to mainly show him the other things in the game, but as it turns out, no one is actually still playing it, making it almost impossible to find a game in now, which kinda sucks, because I would love more of a chance to play as the Ridden. There would be more ways to play if you wanted to run a private match, but it would still rip out all the rewards that you could get. So if you want to try it just for fun, I guess you still could. There's another game mode called Trial of the Worm. This is basically a selection of 4 maps which are chosen at random by the game. You do get a selection of a few at the start of each mission, and then as a team you'll choose which one you want to do. This contains the axe from the campaign, as well as the Ridden hives, which we'll get onto in a minute. It has a sort of arcade feel to it. You're just playing the game normally, and it will give you the extra supply points, which makes the grind feel a little bit easier. But you're scored in this game mode. Everything you do will affect your score, and there are multipliers that you can add in order to boost the score even higher. Now, things that give you multipliers vary massively. The difficulty is an easy one to think of, and then there's things like giving the Ridden more damage, removing weak spots from mutations, all to try and give you a higher score and a better chance of getting up on that leaderboard. Anyway, the Ridden hives. Ridden hives were added to the game back in 2012, and in order to access the hives, at least one member of your party needs to have the DLC for it, which is pretty good because it means that not everyone needs to have it in order to benefit. There's technically only 6 hives, 7 if you include the inner layer, and to be honest, most of them look pretty much the same. They're dark and dingy with a spooky vibe. They're pretty much just run the same way as a normal campaign mission, but there's basically no story for within these hives. It's quite literally just something to break up the normal repeating of missions. There are also the only way that you can get the skull totems. This is used as a currency to get things from one very specific supply line called the collectors. The only irritating thing about this is that the supply line is timed and that skull totems are a little bit more irritating to actually get a hold of. You can only get a max of 3 totems per Ridden hive, 6 if you do the hidden layer as well. And in order to collect them, someone actually has to physically take them out of the hive on the exit, which doesn't actually sound terrible until you realise that it's a melee weapon that takes over your primary weapon. This just makes it that little bit more inconvenient for everyone involved. The gameplay loop of this game is almost addicting. You can get through each mission of the axe relatively quickly, leaving you with the Stardew Valley effect, taking full swing. Just one more mission. The little serotonin boost you're getting from clearing through the game makes it so much fun to do. Even better if you have someone to go through the game with you as well. I was personally missing Left 4 Dead a lot over the last few weeks, thinking back on all the good times I had with my friends on it whilst I was in school, and it made me crave the game again. Back 4 Blood was the perfect thing to satisfy that need. The fast-paced action of it makes it feel like you're constantly moving, and it's eye-opening to see how into the game I managed to get within a few short hours. The game starts off fast, there's no getting into it stage like you get with a few other games. And overall, I've really enjoyed this game, and considering you can pick up the game and the DLCs for less than £15 on PC, it really is worth playing. It's also included with Game Pass, so if you're on Xbox, you can play it with your subscription. And it's on PlayStation Plus Extra, so if you want to give that game a go, you can play it almost anywhere. I hope you've enjoyed the video, remember to hit like on it, subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take it easy.
And because of that, we are one step closer to building a better tomorrow. But what makes our accomplishments truly extraordinary